We're here with the two chairmen of the Problem Solvers Caucus, a group of bipartisan members, 50 members in the House of Representatives. Congressman Josh Gottheimer, a Democrat from New Jersey, and Congressman Tom Reed, a Republican from New York. All right, you both unveiled this fiscal stimulus bill yesterday. It's bipartisan, $1.5 trillion, $450 a week in unemployment. And what else? Tell me more about what else this proposal would do.
So, probably like most Americans, we realize that we're in an economic crisis and a health crisis, and we simply can't afford to wait 6 or 7 more months for us to decide if we're going to do anything. The country is hurting, small businesses are hurting, families are hurting. 50 of us got together, 25 Democrats, 25 Republicans in the Problem Solvers Caucus, and said we've got to do something about this, and provide some sort of framework to hopefully show negotiators who are working on this there is a path forward here, and we've stumbled upon one, and we worked together until we figured one out, and that's what we put out yesterday. It's called March to Common Ground.
And Congressman Reed, one of the thorny issues for Republicans has been funding for state and local governments. This puts it at about $500 billion. Do you think that there is enough Republican support on the state and local funding issue to get something over the finish line?
Clearly there is, because in order for us to support this with 50 members of the Problem Solvers Caucus, you had to get 75% consensus. That's the rule of our group. And we far exceeded that. And so that shows that there's bipartisan support. And on that compromise position on state and local funding, we were able to solve that by focusing on what are we looking at. We're looking at making sure that there's enough relief there for folks when it comes to COVID-19 expenses for state and local governments that are based on actual expenses, documented expenses. And then when you talk about lost revenue, that has to be documented lost revenue year over year, not projections, not projected 2-3 years out, but over the foreseeable future, right in the foreseeable time horizon over the next 12 months. And you have to compare pre-COVID-19 to post-COVID-19 so that it's actually documented, and because we're talking about American taxpayer dollars, and you got to have a commitment to protect those dollars and make sure that you're actually giving relief where it's most needed.
So for folks, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the other thing that was interesting, so of course, as you mentioned, we have resources around employment insurance. We said after 2 months of $450, it would go up to $600, but no more than 100% of wages to give states time to transition to that. We talked about more resources for PPP, $1,200 stimulus check plus money for children. And then we set up this whole mechanism, which was really kind of the secret sauce of it all. It said if in March, which is why we call it March to Common Ground, if in March we haven't made significant progress in getting a vaccine out, if hospitalizations aren't down, more resources automatically kick in. We call them boosters. So that would get the package to a $2 trillion package. However, if things are in a much better place, and we hope that they are, then there's a reducer. It goes down by 200. So in essence, we allowed room for the virus to understand where the progress of the virus is and beating the virus. And that's what we're really focused on, putting facts on the table.
See, I guess my follow-up question here is for folks outside of Washington, the differences between what the mainstream press has really driven this narrative of $500 billion from Leader McConnell versus upwards of $2 to $3 trillion from Speaker Pelosi. So worlds apart. I mean, not even for Wall Street investors, but also, Congressman Reed, for just mom and pop shops, Main Street. They can't wrap their head around these numbers.
And that was also the difference that we did when we went into the room and negotiated this over the last 6 to 8 weeks, is we didn't focus on the top line numbers. What we did is we got to the substance and looked at reports, looked at data, and said, what do people need for the foreseeable future? Getting us to that March kind of goal is what we were trying to focus on. And when you do that, and you look at the substance of what the American people need, that is what drove us to these numbers. And you didn't look at a top-line number and negotiate from there that a lot of people are kind of thinking of in a traditional business deal. That's not what we did. We looked at the substance.
I want to put this question to you first and then just jump right in, Congressman Gottheimer. I don't want to, I know you're not going to criticize leadership or even the polarization of the two parties, but is there a frustration that in this situation, when you've got the central bank, Fed Chair Jay Powell calling for more stimulus, you've got just walk down Main Street in America and see small businesses that are hurting, families that are hurting. Is there a frustration that there just can't be some type of stimulus?
Frustration is an understatement.
Don't say the word you want to say.
Exactly. It's unconscionable that we would do nothing and leave town and not actually help folks. I mean, we all have constituents who are telling us, families, we've got 14% unemployment in New Jersey, 21% of independent restaurants have gone out of business already in Jersey. Businesses are going out, small businesses, families are hurting, they're having trouble putting food on the table, and that's why we focused also on WIC and SNAP and other food safety programs to make sure people are okay. And we looked at each other and said, we have to find a way forward. There's absolutely no way we can go home without it. And frankly, we found there's a path forward here. We're trying to show that, listen, if you talk to each other, there is a way forward. Please go back to the table, use this framework as a starting point, and let's get this done.
And the good news is we saw yesterday, and I was glad to see the Speaker's public comments, we're going to stay here until we get the COVID-19 deal done. And then we saw Mark Meadows issue positive comments about the Problem Solvers Caucus proposal. This is a worthy proposal for consideration. My understanding is we're probably going to see some more positive conversations out of the White House today about let's get in the room and let's finish this for the American people. And I believe this proposal has been part of that thawing of this gridlock. That's good, because that's good for the American people, and that's Congress doing its job.
So you think that we could have a vote on this, or is this starting a conversation? As you said, the thawing, do you think we're going to get a vote? When timetable do you think?
I personally think, as Tom just said, given what we've heard out of the White House and good news out of Democratic leadership, that there's an interest in staying here to get something done. That means we're going to get something done before we go home, before the election. I mean, people can't, and that's the whole thing, as you said, like people just can't afford to wait until after the inauguration to get help, right? I mean, whether you're a small business, whether it's a family, whether you're a state and local government, can't afford to pay cops and teachers, right, and firefighters. These are real issues, and if we don't do something about it, we're going to have, this crisis is not going away overnight, so we've got to help people.
Totally agree. That's why it's imperative we do this now and we get it done. And this is the time frame. We have 3 weeks. We're here. And the proposals that are out there are well versed. They're well out there, and people know what they are here in Congress. And it's just about finishing the dials, finishing the fine tuning. And that's why we recognize we're not the final negotiators. That's why it's up to the White House, the leadership on both sides in the Senate and the House. And we've been talking to them throughout this whole process. We have a commitment. We don't want to surprise anyone in the work that we're doing here. And at the end of the day, they can move these dials to an appropriate place.
And I'll just add to that, part of the whole conversation we've had the last 6 weeks, and led by Dusty Johnson and Dean Phillips, two members of Congress that we worked very closely with in the caucus, with Abigail Spanberger, Anthony Gonzalez. So there's a whole group of us that have gotten together and said, let's just figure it out. Let's stay in the room. And that's really what we hope to encourage leadership to do, and folks who go back to the negotiators, go back to the table, is, hey, here's a great framework. Stay in the room. Don't go home until you say, here's a way forward. We're all ready to vote. We're ready to go. We think this is a very sensible, reasonable, bipartisan way forward.